Okay, so in this video, we are going to be talking about the different kinds of priorities that align with different kinds of tasks. This is really important to understand when you are prioritizing things so you know what kind of priority it is, what you're dealing with, and you're able to weight it accordingly. This is part 2 in my series on making and setting priorities. If you missed part 1, that's on different myths about priorities. You can check it out on my channel. I'll link to it in the description. But basically, today we are just going to be talking about these 3 different types of priorities that I've come up with. This is not like a scientific thing. I'm definitely going to be learning more about priorities as things come on, but this is just sort of some categories that I've assigned to help us in our thinking about priorities as we are making them. Okay, are you ready? Okay, so the first kind of priorities we're going to talk about are holistic priorities. These are the priorities that you really identify with personally. These are part of who you are. They underpin every decision. They are based in your values as a person. These are often what people are talking about when they say they need to get their priorities in order. They're saying they have too many competing values and they need to figure out which one is actually going to prevail. Not always. Sometimes they're talking about tasks on their to-do list, but a lot of times I feel like this is what people are talking about when they talk about priorities. And holistic priorities really only come into play in 2 specific kinds of ways when you are talking about getting things done. The first is in what habits you choose to build. So habits are, as James Clear puts it, votes for our identity. Every day that you work on a good habit, you are voting for that positive identity that you have of yourself. And every day, conversely, when you indulge in a bad habit, you are voting for that identity in yourself, whether that disappoints you or not. So your values really do determine what's important to you in terms of what habits you want to stick with and keep going with. And if you want to read more about this, James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, is a fantastic resource. He doesn't use the term holistic priorities, but the things that he talks about in that book with identity and habits, the connection between them, tie in perfectly with this type of priority. The second way that holistic priorities are going to affect maybe your calendar or your to-do list is really in the basis of how you deal with decisions that are somewhat gray. They're not a black and white area. So for example, say that one of your priorities as a person is you want to be honest. Now, honesty means different things in different cultural contexts. I'm going to be using my own cultural context here. And so I'm going to be talking about honesty as being not only honest, but also upfront and direct, right? So you can imagine that honesty would be on one end of a spectrum and then politeness would be on the other end. Those are both very valuable things, right? But you know that for you, when it comes down to it, you would prefer to be honest versus being polite. Okay, cool. So that's going to affect how you decide to handle certain situations. Something comes up at work that is too much for you or that you don't like. You're probably going to make the decision based on, at least in part, your value, your holistic priority of being honest, how to address it, right? There are going to be some things that are not acceptable to you because of that priority. And then there are going to be other things that will be more appealing. Obviously, you may need to filter that through a lot of other decision-making factors, and you may decide, after all, to stay silent, even though honesty is one of your values, but it will definitely figure in to that decision. Basically, with holistic priorities, these are the things that make you feel good about yourself, make you feel like you are being true to yourself, and they're going to have a little bit of a say in pretty much every decision you're making. It's really helpful to know what these priorities are for you specifically, because if you don't, a lot of times that means you end up trying to do all of it. You may say, well, but I want to be honest and polite, which is obviously what we should all be striving for all the time. But there are some situations where you're going to feel like that's impossible. And depending where on the spectrum you fall, you need to know which side you prefer to land on. And this isn't just limited to things like honesty. There are all sorts of values that can be considered to be unequivocally good that you're going to have to wade through. So there's a couple of tools that I found that are really helpful for determining your holistic priorities at any given period of time. Obviously, these are not going to fluctuate as much as your other priorities may based on season of life because they're really rooted in who you are. But sometimes we don't actually know what those things are that we value most. And so some exercises can be helpful in figuring that out. The first is something called the Value Sort Card app. I will link to it in the description. And basically, this is a wonderful little app that points you through flashcards and you get to pick your top priorities with the situation that you're trying to deal with. And then it just makes you filter through. I think it starts with 25 or 30, then it filters down to 10 or 5, and then it makes you filter down to 1. And it's just a really helpful exercise. You could do the same thing with flashcards on your own, but it is a free app, so I will go ahead and put a link to that in the description. The other thing is the process that Andy Stanley outlines in his talk, Winning. I'll link to that in the description as well. I'm just linking to everything today. But he talks about how he, for his life and with his wife and in his parenting and other things, how he comes up with these phrases or these lists of values that he wants to adhere to in his life no matter what. So that's a really inspiring talk. It's, I think, about 30 or 40 minutes. And he also talks through this process of writing down the things that are most important to you, making a big long list, and then narrowing it down to 3 to 7 things so that those can kind of be your guiding light when things get confusing or unclear for you. The next type of priorities are what I call responsibility-related priorities. Now, these can be divided further into 2 categories, and I'm going to do it. But basically, responsibility-related categories can be defined as those priorities that you are not making for yourself, but rather other people or other situations are imposing on you. These may be responsibilities that you took on willingly, like, parenting or your job, but ultimately you are accountable to other people for these responsibility related priorities. And you're probably going to be letting someone else down if you do not keep them. These can be really, really hard. I know for me, these are some of the toughest ones to discern. So let's talk about the different categories and some things you can do to help set priorities even when you don't feel like you're the one in control. The first of the responsibility-related categories that I want to talk about is care-focused priorities. These are the things that you need to do to get you and the people that you care about through a particular day, week, or season of life. Things that might fall in this category would be things like making appointments, cleaning the house, taking your dog on a walk. All of these things are important and need to be done, but some of them are more important than others. Some are less urgent. So in the next video, we're going to be talking about some ways that you can filter through decision making when it feels like there are too many things in a specific category that you need to focus on. And care-related tasks are definitely one of them. A really good book on this topic is called How to Keep House While Drowning by Casey Davis. Again, I will link to it in the description. But we'll go ahead and dive into some ideas on that in the next video as well. But for this video, the one key takeaway that I want you to have with these care-related tasks is that not all things are as urgent as you probably think they are. If you feel like you are overwhelmed by the amount of things that need to be done to take care of yourself and your house and the people that you live with and love and the animals that you live with and love, chances are not all the things that you're trying to do are as urgent as you think they are. If you are trying to keep your house as clean as possible, there may be a good time to give yourself some grace and say you just need to keep it as clean as it needs to be to stay healthy. Maybe you don't need to be doing every single thing you're doing, but we'll talk about that. And that is definitely on a person by person basis. So I feel for you there. I get that all the time. And I just have a dog. I don't even have kids or anything like that. So we're in this together. We're going to figure it out. Second category of priorities are what I called preservation-related priorities. And now that I'm hearing that, that might be a little bit of a dramatic word, but that is sometimes how it feels when you're trying to figure out what you have time for and you're feeling overwhelmed. Is like there are these tasks that you just feel like you have to do in order to survive, right? you have to show up to work. You have to make sure that you pay your bills and your taxes. You have to do these things in order to remain living and have money and have all of these things. So this is for sure a concern, right? It's not like you can say, wow, I'm feeling really stressed out by work. I guess I'm just not going to do any of the projects that have been assigned to me. You don't normally have that option, right? I don't think your boss is probably going to react very kindly to you just saying like, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this today. However, there are some ways that you can ask for help at work. You can ask coworkers, you can talk to your boss, especially if they are understanding, or you can try to delegate other things so that you are able to take on a better load if you really do need to focus on those preservation tasks. This is not an easy situation, but there are some ways you can work through them. And we will dive into that in a future video as well. But for this video, I just want you to be thinking about what are some things that you could maybe rearrange, some conversations you could have to demote the urgency of certain tasks, or maybe things you could even delegate, train someone else to do so that it's not as urgent. And then I included a final category in here, which I'm calling the not really priorities. These are things that fall under the responsibility related priorities thing. But they're not care tasks. They're not taking care of yourself or the people or things or animals that you love. And they are not preservation related. In fact, they're not super urgent to anyone, but you feel like they're still important. These are called not really priorities, unless they are related to our final category, which we're going to in a minute. But these are the things that you are held accountable for by other people, but they are not actually priorities. So some things, depending on your season of life or what your needs are, that might fall into this category might be vacuuming your house every day, or cooking home-cooked meals 5 times a week, or things where you are held accountable, but they may not be as important as you really think that they are when you're thinking about it, or you feel like they should be to you. And it's okay to assign things to this not really priorities category for a while, and then move them back into an actual priority when your time frees up, or you find a way to do them in a way that doesn't increase your mental, emotional, physical load that you are already carrying. Okay, and then the final category of priorities, these are some of my favorite, are what I'm calling achievement priorities. These are the priorities that you have because they are helping you move toward a goal that is meaningful to you. These are things that you are doing for your own personal satisfaction and enrichment. These are different from care tasks because you need to take care of yourself, and so those are always going to be a priority. There's not really a goal in mind with most of those. These achievement-related ones are really focused on a goal. You can find these by asking yourself where you would like to be in 5 years or 10 years, and then noticing what steps or thinking through what steps you want to take to get there. One caveat with these achievement-related priorities is that I feel like it is really, really easy for us to blow these off, especially if you have a lot of responsibility-related priorities. It is so easy to just say, well, those achievement ones don't really matter. But I would encourage you, whether you are somebody who thinks they don't matter or somebody who tends to make a lot of them and then just never act on them because there's too many, I would encourage you to pick 1 to 3 achievement-related priorities for yourself that you want to pursue over the next few months. Just give it a try, see if it's something you want to keep working toward, because this brings a lot of satisfaction. It also helps you connect with yourself, and it opens up avenues for the future that you may not see coming. So I would encourage you to pick 1 if you don't have any, and then if you tend to pick too many, try to narrow it down to 3 so that you hopefully actually can act on them. Okay, and that is it for today. I hope you have the best day. Let me know in the comments what your achievement-related priority is that you're either currently working on or going to be working on next. And then also let me know if there are any kinds of priorities that you struggle with the most. I really want to hear from you so that I can continue to make videos that are really helpful. So see you later.